Greetings, all you beautiful inhabitants of this great green planet. It is a special edition of Power Rankings today on League on Lock, and that is because for the first time pretty much in all of spring, we have all four major regions playing together at the same time for at least a week, which means our first installment of Global Power Rankings will drop. Maybe we'll continue it throughout the LCS and LEC playoffs, but for today, we're going 20 to number 1. That's right, we're extended beyond the normal top 10, going 20 to number 1. Let's start with your numbers 20 to 11, LPL, LCK, LEC, and LCS, all represented on this list. And yeah, there's a little bit less of the North American teams, but there are a couple. Starting with the very first one is EG, right in at number 19. Evil Geniuses, a spot ahead of Misfits. EG obviously won the tiebreaker to finish second overall in the regular season for the LCS, which means they don't have to play Cloud9 for a long time. Well, until finals, theoretically. But Jizuke and Bang have been two of the best featured carries in the LCS, which again, isn't actually saying that much compared to some of the other teams, but they've looked pretty solid. Svenskeren has bounced back. Kumo is still the main question mark on this squad if he can show up and put up a better performances. They are a spot ahead of Misfits, who've kind of fallen off a little bit towards the end of the split, but that's almost a toss-up, and that's going to be a theme we're talking about on this list, is how even some of the squads could be if they were matched in a theoretical best of series. EG and Misfits, I think, could go either way, so they are 19 and 20 as the West makes their first marks on this list. Then you got a trio of LPL squads, OMG, EDG, and JDG. A lot of G's, by the way, involved over there. A lot of gaming squads. But OMG, 5-2. They're now on a 3-game losing streak. They were in the top 10, almost knocking on top 5 when we did LPL rankings. They have since kind of crashed back to reality, asserted themselves more in that middle of the pack in Chinese League of Legends, which is what you more so expected out of them. EDG, Hope has been an absolute bright spot for them, and been the featured carry for them in almost every game that we've seen them win, at least. Scout continues to be Scout with incredibly high highs and sometimes a little bit too much aggression getting caught out. But EDG, even the top side of the map, Ioti has been better than you were maybe anticipating, as well as Jinjia in the jungle. EDG looks good. They look like a playoff team. JDG, without Zoom, arguably their best player, Kanavi, has been playing out of his mind. He got back-to-back MVPs on their last series win, and if they're winning a game, chances are Kanavi is the driving force for them performing well, and he's going to be in contention for some of the most player of the game awards in the LPL. I feel like the ceiling might even be higher for EDG than JDG going forward, just because Scout and Hope honestly are better perennial carry threats so far, from what I've seen at least, than Yagao and Loken on JDG. The first Korean team on the board are the Afrika Freaks in at number 15. This is the team, remember, they won the Kespa Cup, and then you thought, okay, is that for real? And they look great at the start. They're very, I don't want to say up and down, because that's a little bit too easy. Mystic has been incredibly consistent for them. The jungle, it's 2019 all over again. Is it Dread? Is it Spirit? Spirit seems to be more, he's still the safer pick. Dread has had less of those pop-off performances, world-class looking jungler games than we've seen in recent years on Afrika, so still not sold on this Freaks roster. Still also haven't seen Keen pop off quite to the level that we're anticipated from seeing the self-dubbed and titled best top laner in the LCK coming into this year. Mad Lions all the way up at number 14 for 4 rookies on this squad, and we kind of talked about Rogue, Mad Lions, and Misfits all as a bunch throughout the last few weeks of the regular season, but week 9 really cemented. As you can see, Rogue is not in the top 20 Not after the 0-2 that they had in Week 9, combined with how they went up against Fnatic and G2 and were very clearly outclassed in those matches. That was forgivable, but Week 9 was not, so they're out. And Mad Lions, a win against Origin only has them climbing higher. Yes, they are the 4th best team in Europe, but the top 3 is pretty damn good right now in the LEC. So Mad Lions, regardless of how these playoffs end, really have had an incredible debut split for so many rookies on this roster. RNG finally bounced back from the rough 0-2 that they had against Vici Gaming. They looked better. They had the crazy Game 3, which we already talked about, against EDG in the rivalry, the grudge match, whatever you want to call it. But they're up. Well, they're not up. We haven't done a global power ranking, so there's no movement from last week because there was no last week, but they're maybe higher than you might have anticipated for RNG. They still have world-class players in, XLB has the potential to be there. Zhao, who at times has still looked like a world-class mid laner, and Uzi, whenever he returns, even Betty has looked like one of the better AD carries in the LPL. They're one spot behind TES, Top Esports. We have yet to see the full unleashed power of what we saw in 2019 out of Knight. The Knight and Karsa synergy has looked pretty darn good, as well as 369. The big question mark has been Fodic and whoever the support is alongside him. It varies from game to game on TES. The bot lane still looks like a weak point, maybe even weaker than what we saw last year out of them. So remains to be seen if it's fully an improvement, but overall team play, the synergy is still there, and the potential is a little bit higher than RNG's, I think, and that's why they have one more win, and they're one spot ahead of them. KT Rolster. Never thought I would be including them on any kind of power rankings list unless it was worst LCK teams of all time. That was at least after their 0-5 start. 7 wins in a row later. We're talking about aiming as being one of the best AD carries in the LCK. They're just kind of firing on all cylinders as a team. They actually have very interesting drafts. Yes, they're fully built around aiming, but it's not these typical hyper carries. It's been the Ezreal several times. Not even a poke comp, just 4 meathead melee bruisers in front of aiming, and he's just there to be artillery on the backline on that Ezreal, and it's worked, man. 7 series wins in a row. Not excited about them, but you are impressed, and they definitely already matched more wins than I thought they would in all of spring. So really, there's no room for them to disappoint because they've already exceeded my expectations. So shout outs to you, KT Rolster, as they wrap up our list. 20-11. We move to the top 10, 10-6. It is another European team, the 3rd on the list. Origin, always playing third fiddle to G2 and Fnatic, but I've talked about it before. They haven't really done anything wrong per se in the spring split. It's because they play a very conservative, safe kind of play style, which is the opposite to almost every other team in Europe. So people kind of sleep on and forget about them. And sometimes that play style doesn't match up when you go against the G2s and the Fnatics of the LEC. But Origin still play a very clean, mistake-free a lot of the time. They have had some ugly losses to Schalke, an improved Schalke that is, but Origin deserving of, I think, right outside that top 10 bubble or the last line of defense in at that number 10 spot. Dragon X have had a couple of bad losses recently, but Chovy, Deft, and these rookies, Incuria and Piosik, are still, the ceiling is higher, and you've seen greater highs already from them than you have in Origin, which is why they're one spot ahead of them at number 9. Fnatic in at number 8. They have the same record as Origin. They finish as that 2nd seed, and that's your first round matchup on the winners or top half of the draw, Fnatic versus Origin. And they split the season series, but I don't think many people would argue that across the entire split, Fnatic has looked like the stronger and scarier team, especially when you're kind of judging them metrically right beside G2 in those head-to-head matchups that they did have. Fnatic, I'm excited to see this roster with Selfmade play these best of series. Depending on how well they do, you feel like it's inevitable that they're going to match up against G2 at least once in a best of 5, maybe twice. We'll see how it plays out. of course, but Fnatic in at number 8 and should absolutely be terrifying for anyone not named G2 to match up against them in playoffs, because we know Whippo's champion pool is absolutely insane. The second and final, only 2 of them, North American teams on the top 10, or in the top 20, excuse me. No one else is cracking the top 10. You knew Cloud9 would be on this list. It was just a matter of where you put them, and it is a little bit delicate as to where you throw them. And in general, the LEC and the LCS, when you include them in these global power rankings against teams from Korea and China who are playing in best of 3s, there's just so many more games to gauge and so much more information to go through when judging these other squads that play twice as many games, probably 3 times, definitely 3 times as many by the time the split is over. But Cloud9, they only dropped a single game. We know how terrible the LCS has been all year, but the sheer level of dominance that Cloud9 has done, they absolutely deserve to still be in the top 10, top 7 for us even. And talking about coin flip toss-ups, I think Fnatic and C9 are at very comparable levels, and if they had, a hypothetical best of series, I think it could absolutely go either way. But for now, Cloud9 is that spot ahead of Fnatic, and who knows, we might update it as playoffs roll on. The final team just outside, and I do mean just outside of the top 5, is T1, and that seems a little bit harsh because at 10-2, they've had an incredible run, an incredible start to spring with the rookies and Kana and Elim now stepping up, cuz even before he was losing starts to Elim was looking fantastic. The big test for T1, they go up against Gen.G on Wednesday, and that will obviously have huge implications when we come back to do these listings again for the following week. But T1, it's really no fault of their own. Sure, they had that one loss to the Freak of Freaks. Their only other loss was earlier to Hanwha. As you know, they always struggle against them. But T1, they've looked great. It's just simply the top 5 is absolutely stacked and truly insane. And T1, one spot behind the first member of our top 5, which is G2. Much like C9 and Fnatic, I think G2 and T1 are pretty evenly matched in levels of strength right now. Obviously, we had some incredible best of 5s between these two squads back in 2019. Would love to see it again in 2020. Both of them have had solid starts to their spring splits and are absolute title favorites. Top 2 for G2, the favorites. T1, number 2 right behind Gen.G for the favorites to win all of spring. And even G2 in 5th place, people might say. That seems kind of crazy. 15-3, the incredible 2019, they had the same roster. But listen, the top 3 in the LPL right now is so unbelievably stacked, and you feel bad for the rest of the pool in China, because when you have Invictus Gaming down at number 4, who are now 8-1, coming off a win against OMG, where Rookie got back-to-back MVPs, and they won convincingly with the Shy borderline inting in both of these games. He was getting ganked a lot. There was a lot of pressure, but the fact that this team can now showcase again what we saw in 2018, where they don't even need the Shy and Rookie firing on all cylinders on the same game to pick up wins, is what makes them so terrifying. We know the chaotic, crazy play style that they have. Fight, skirmish, we'll fight you anywhere on the map. It works, not only in the LPL, but we saw G2 do it internationally as well. Rookie is absolutely in form already. The Shy before this match against OMG was absolutely annihilating people, and Puff and Southwind have fit in seamlessly on this roster. You can say Puff is even a slight downgrade to Jackie Love. Sure, I might give you that, but Southwind is such a huge upgrade over Baolon that it makes this team even stronger than what we saw in 2019. The team above them, and the only team that's beaten IG so far, is E-Star, and I truly contemplated, I almost wanted to put E-Star even higher than number 3, because they're kind of an unknown commodity to most people. If you haven't been watching their games, you've been missing out. They're absolutely annihilating people, exactly what they did to IG. They are 9-1. That one series loss falls to EDG, and you might say, how were they even behind FPX when they won that head-to-head matchup? FPX was a different roster in week 1, and they have not looked the same since, the massive hiatus that the LPL took. FPX completely figured everything out. It's a different roster since when eStar first played them, but eStar's still 9-1, and these rookies are the real deal. It's not, oh, should we start taking them seriously? Yes, you should have been taking eStar seriously 2.5 weeks ago. Them annihilating IG only puts them further on the center of the radar in the LPL. These guys haven't played best of series in the playoffs yet, but as we head towards the playoffs in spring, they should absolutely be in that conversation for title favorites, and so should Gen.G. As the main title favorites, you could probably put Gen.G number 1, and I wouldn't be upset. I don't think most people would be upset. They've won 8 series in a row. They've 2-0'd 5 series in a row, and it's totally polar opposite play styles to what we have in the LPL, where they are slow, they are controlled. Sometimes there's 5 kills at 30 minutes, and they still have a 10K gold lead. It is absolute macro brilliance at times for them. BDD is looking like a world-class mid laner again. Funny how that works when you actually have a good team around you. Clid has hardly lost a step since when he was on T1 last year. A Ruler hasn't needed to be nearly the carry that we saw from previous iterations of, go as far back as KSV or Samsung after their world championship. He hasn't had to put on those carry pants. We know he's still more than capable. Gen.G was the most hyped up roster in the offseason in Korea, and they have absolutely delivered on it so far. We'll see again when they match up against T1, where that slots them in the rankings. FPX are in at number 1, 8 series in a row, same as Gen.G, and they have been annihilating a lot of those. So listen, they lost 4 games, right? They went 0-2 to start the split. Since then, they've only dropped 3 games in 8 series. They have been completely annihilating people, even more so than eStar. They've been more one-sided. We've seen eStar win these games, but kind of go toe-to-toe and be even, sneak out a win in some of these matches against lower-tier teams in the LPL. FPX haven't been doing any of that. They've been butchering these people on the Rift. Doing B's playing Cassidy, he's playing tanks, he's playing whatever he wants. Most recently, Khan finally returned to give Victory 5 a just miserable day on the Rift. But if and when they can figure out how to play around Khan more and adapt their play style to when they have more of a carry-oriented top laner, it will take FBX to levels that we didn't even see in 2019. And oh, by the way, what did they do in 2019? That's right, they won the World Championship. That's your 20-1 global power rankings. Through March 31st, we'll probably revisit these again next week after the first round of playoffs in the LEC and LCS.